How does a nation go from believing it's absolutely invincible to total, crushing collapse in just a few short years? Well, today, we're going to look at the Second World War from the inside, from the perspective of the Third Reich. We'll trace the arc of a war machine that was built on a really powerful idea, the brutal reality that brought it all crashing down. Let's dive in. And really, at the heart of this whole story is the big idea, you could even call it the big lie, that made the war possible in the first place. It's this powerful, deceptive narrative of destiny, of strength, and maybe most importantly, of historical revenge. It was a story told to the German people long before a single shot was ever fired. So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll follow this incredible rise and this devastating fall, starting with how the war machine was even built. Then, we'll look at the myth of its unstoppable power, where that power first started to crack, the desperate shift to total war, the absolute breaking point of Stalingrad, and finally, the brutal end in the streets of Berlin. Okay, so let's set the stage. After World War I, Germany was basically shackled by the Treaty of Versailles. Its army was cut down to just 100,000 men. But then, starting in 1933, a massive process of rearmament begins. At first, it's all done in secret, but then it's out in the open, in total defiance of the entire world. You know, what's absolutely staggering here is the speed. In 1933, it kicks off secretly, disguised as these big public works programs. But by 1935, the mask is completely off. Military service becomes mandatory, and boom, you have the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe. Then the four-year plan in 36 puts the entire economy on a war footing. So think about it. In just 6 years, an army of 100,000 transforms into a modern, massive force of millions, ready for conquest. So now you've got this enormous new army. The question wasn't if they were going to use it, but how. And the answer would be this revolutionary military doctrine, something engineered to be the complete opposite of the grinding, miserable trench warfare that had scarred an entire generation. They called it Blitzkrieg, lightning war. And the core idea was simple but radical. Don't just slowly wear the enemy down. Instead, you hit them so hard and so fast that their whole command structure just collapses, almost instantly. I mean, this was a radical break from 100 years of military thinking. And you can see just how terrifyingly effective this was. Step 1. Air power. The Luftwaffe bombs airfields, cuts communication lines, and just creates total chaos. Step 2. Armor. The Panzer divisions punch a hole right through the front line and race deep, deep into enemy territory. And then, Step 3. Infantry. Motorized units pour in right behind them to lock it all down. It's like a symphony of destruction. Air, armor, and infantry, all in perfect, terrifying sync. The first real test for this new strategy came in Poland, 1939. And just look at the numbers here. We're talking 1.5 million men, thousands of tanks, thousands of aircraft. The force was just overwhelming. And the pretext for it all? A completely fabricated attack on a German radio station, which was then used by propaganda to paint Germany as the victim.
After Poland, the Blitzkrieg was unleashed on the West, and it led to the stunningly fast defeat of France. For the German people, this was so much more than a military victory. It felt like historic revenge for the humiliation of Versailles. The myth of the invincible Wehrmacht was now cemented in the national mind.
But you know, every myth has its limits. Every story of invincibility eventually hits a wall. And this narrative of unstoppable force was about to hit its first major obstacle, revealing that the German war machine was not, in fact, invincible. And in 1940, you see this perfect split. On the one hand, total, stunning success on land in France. On the other, total failure in the air over Britain. The Luftwaffe, you see, was designed for tactical ground support, not a long, strategic air war. It was completely unprepared for an enemy with a sophisticated radar network and just an unbreakable will to resist. For the first time, the Blitzkrieg had failed. The planned invasion of Britain? Yeah, that was off the table. So if you can't defeat Britain in the West, where do you go? You turn east. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, was the largest military operation in human history. Over 3 million soldiers were mobilized, all driven by this ideological goal of conquering Lebensraum, living space, and destroying communism once and for all. The initial advance was incredibly rapid, but the reality for the soldiers on the ground was just brutal. They were facing immense distances, horrific weather, and logistical nightmares. The Eastern Front was nothing like the quick campaigns in the West. This quote from a soldier just captures it perfectly. Fatigue became a mental fog. That's the war changing right there.
So with the war grinding to a stalemate in the East and still no victory in the West, that whole dream of a quick triumph was dead. Germany really had no choice but to shift its entire society and its economy into a new, desperate phase: total war.
A man named Albert Speer, the armaments minister, took control, and he centralized the entire war economy with this ruthless efficiency. The result was called the armaments miracle, a shocking surge in the production of tanks, planes, and weapons. And here's the crazy part. This is happening at the very moment the war is starting to turn against Germany on the battlefield. But behind this so-called miracle was a horrifying reality. This production boom was powered by millions of forced laborers, people brought from occupied countries, prisoners of war, all working in brutal, inhumane conditions just to keep that war machine running.
The entire nation was mobilized for this one cause. But it makes you wonder, right? Was everyone inside Germany actually on board with this? Was there any resistance?
The answer is yes, though this resistance was scattered and just ruthlessly suppressed. I mean, in a state where saying the wrong thing could get you killed, you had groups like the White Rose, led by students, and even some church leaders who spoke out. But the most direct challenge, well, that came from within the military itself. The July 20th plot in 1944, a failed attempt by officers to assassinate Hitler. But even with the entire economy churning out weapons and internal resistance being crushed, the military situation was getting worse and worse. And one battle, more than any other, would mark the definitive, undeniable turning point of the war.
Stalingrad. For the German people and for the army, this one word, it came to mean the beginning of the end.
The surrender of the entire Sixth Army at Stalingrad was so much more than a military disaster. It was a profound emotional breakdown for the entire nation. For the very first time, that myth of invincibility was completely shattered, and the word defeat, a word that was once unthinkable, started to enter the national consciousness. After Stalingrad, it was a long, bloody retreat all the way back to Germany. And now, the war was coming home, bringing with it a level of devastation that is truly hard to even comprehend.
The end was just a complete societal collapse. Allied bombers were systematically turning German cities into rubble. In a final, desperate act, the regime created something called the Volkssturm, literally throwing old men and young boys into the path of veteran armies. By the very end, with Soviet cannons leveling Berlin block by block, the entire Nazi project just imploded in a bunker deep beneath the burning city.
And so we're left with this really big, haunting question. In the story of any nation, or any grand ambition for that matter, where exactly does that pursuit of destiny end? And where does the path to catastrophe begin?